Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around it is my review of the 2009 film Avatar. Now before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Sean for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now Avatar is one of those movies that I have honestly went through the full gamut of emotions and feelings for throughout the years. When I first saw it in the theater in IMAX and in 3D, I was blown away by it. It was one of the most immersive and incredible cinematic experiences of my life. I was a fan. I understood why so many people were really into the film. I understood why people went and saw it numerous times. In 2009, there truly was nothing else like Avatar. And then I saw it on a DVD or Blu-ray or streaming years later, and it wasn't nearly as incredible or amazing of an experience for me. I noticed the film's flaws more, and ultimately I came away a little disappointed by it. Then I rewatched it again recently for this review, and maybe it's because of the fact that technology has kind of caught up a little bit over the years, or maybe it's just because I was a little more lenient on it this time in terms of my expectations. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it. I thought that the visuals were still incredible. For 2009, the things that James Cameron and his crew accomplished with CGI is unbelievable. It still is unbelievable. I mean, if you think about it, there are certain shots in this that look like stuff that you only started seeing now. And even after Avatar, you didn't really see a lot of stuff in the arena of CGI that was really on the same level until the past 5 or 10 years. Also, this was a big deal. Like, I think some people think that it was like a gimmick nowadays, like, oh, it was only one of those movies that was a hit because it was in 3D and so on. No, a lot of people were really hyped about it because James Cameron was back. He hadn't directed anything since Titanic. And then you had people going all out at the premiere. I remember people dressing up as Na'vi with makeup and everything when it comes to the opening weekend of Avatar. So Avatar was not one of those things that was just like, oh, people just went and saw it for the 3D only and blah, 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 blah. And it was just lightning in a bottle. Because I remember I've seen videos talking about that. No, this film was destined to become a massive box office success. The hype was real. It wasn't manufactured. It was there were a lot of people who were really, really excited to see this movie and marked it on their calendars and went all out in terms of dressing up and putting makeup on and so on. And in some ways it was kind of lightning in a bottle with the 3D and with the CGI, because it's really not something that you would ever technically seen before in that capacity in 2009. But other than that, though, when it comes to a lot of the other things, it was just a movie that was just an out of control box office behemoth that was just going to make buttloads of money. And that's exactly what happened with Avatar upon its release. And on home video, and with re-releases. There's a reason why the film made so much money and made such a massive profit for Cameron and 20th Century Fox and everyone else involved with the movie. One thing about this film that to me is just consistently good, let alone great, is James Cameron's direction. James Cameron is what I consider to be a fantastic filmmaker for the most part. He started his career as a crew member working on the practical effects and model work for a lot of low budget Roger Corman films, then moved his way up and got his shot in the industry and directed uh, instant classics like The Terminator. And then after that, he did Terminator 2 and The Abyss and Aliens and True Lies. And these are all films that were not only popular with audiences, but popular with critics for the most part. And he was on one hell of a run. I mean, the run that he had from The Terminator on to True Lies is one of the best runs out of any filmmaker that I can think of. Then he did Titanic. He won the Oscar for that. The film broke box office records. It was a critical and financial smash. And at the time, I was a fan of that film too. I mean, I saw that in the theater with one of my grandmothers, and I watched it on VHS, that double VHS that seemingly almost everybody had at the time. And that's another film that I don't really necessarily feel the same way about it that I did when I saw it initially. Like, I still don't mind the movie for the spectacle and for the finale with the ship sinking and all that other stuff, but it's too long. The romance is just not really something that really resonates that strongly with me anymore. So it's really one of those movies where I enjoy it as a disaster movie and less as the epic romance that it actually is. But that's a whole other story. But this is also the time where I think Cameron started to become a bit complacent and started to think, oh, I'm the king of the world. I won an Oscar for Titanic, and so I could do no wrong. And I think that's honestly why Avatar suffers when it comes to its script. But when it comes to the direction, it's like James Cameron didn't even miss a beat. Like, it seemed like he hadn't directed uh, a film in as long as he actually had. Like, it's one of those things where he hadn't directed anything since Titanic in 1997. So it was over a decade, and he had since he had directed a film, and didn't really feel like it was the case here. It's not like he was going through the motions. It's not like he had lost his ability to showcase grand visuals and use angles and movement and different cinematic and filmmaking techniques to his disposal to create stunning imagery. Like, he hadn't lost any of that. He hadn't lost the ability to showcase the tension and thrills of certain sequences. If anything, he got better when it comes to shooting things that weren't necessarily done for real. And he got better as a filmmaker when it comes to seamlessly blending the series of shots that would have been shot on a set compared to the shots that were otherwise, that were completely inside a computer. Because there's a lot of shots in this film that are just completely computer generated. There's not any semblance of a real shot of a real location or a real setting or with real people and actors and so on. It's all computer generated. And I think he still managed to showcase his signature style and his eye for detail in those scenes, as well as the few scenes that were done more practically. And Avatar is not something new for James. Like, Avatar is a project that was a genuine labor of love for him. And that really does show when it comes to the care that he puts into his direction for this movie. I mean, he started working on Avatar all the way back in 1994. So this isn't one of those things where he just thought, "Oh, it's been a while since I've done a movie. I'm gonna do some kind of fantasy film, and I'm going to use it as a way to showcase the latest in technology. He wanted to do Avatar and had been wanting to do Avatar for a long time, even prior to doing Titanic. So it's not one of those things that was just kind of a new deal for him. I think he wanted to do it like sooner after Titanic, but he realized that because of the technology that was available at the time, he wasn't really able to do as much as he wanted to when it comes to the visuals. So he waited. He waited till the technology was available, and or he waited till the technology was invented. Because I remember correctly, I think a lot of the stuff that was used in this film was completely new technology that James Cameron was involved with creating himself. So say whatever you want about James Cameron, but this is a man who's driven. This is a man who is talented. This is a man who is willing to take however long that he feels he has to in order to get something right when it comes to at least the technique, when it comes to the visuals. I think he should have taken more time when it comes to getting the script right, but that's another story entirely. But when it comes to the direction here, it's just as dynamic and strong as anything he had directed previously. At least for me personally, I don't feel that the direction in this movie is weaker or not really on the same level as some of his other films in his filmography. But when it comes to the script, I think that that is absolutely an instance where the quality or the overall strength is weaker than what I'm used to when it comes to James Cameron. I think that kind of started with Titanic as well, because I do think that's a drawn out story. It had no reason to be as long as it was, and there was way too much of a focus on the romance. It was in a lot of ways, honestly, a rather simple story, but for some reason it was just unbelievably played out and extended. And that trend carried over with the script for Avatar. This is not a story that needed nearly 3 hours to tell. I mean, that's just the theatrical version. If you watch the extended versions or the director's cut, those are even longer. And I don't think the extra scenes really did that much for the film. Maybe a little bit more in terms of the plot, maybe a little bit more when it comes to characterization or depth, but not enough in the way to really make things significantly better. That's just how I feel about it, though, because what sacrificed is the film's pacing, which is already too slow at times. So when you have the film now being over 3 hours, then it's just even more sluggish and slow in certain spots. That's why when I rewatched it, I rewatched the theatrical cut. But the script, here's the thing about the screenplay. When it comes to showcasing the various different aspects of the world of Pandora and the plants and the animals and the wildlife and all of these other things, the script is definitely pretty solid when it comes to uh the technical aspects, when it comes to uh the technology, for instance, of the avatars and a lot of this other stuff. I think the script is also really good and very creative. I think the idea of the avatars is very cool and innovative, and it's executed rather well when it comes to the screenplay. I think the script is at its best when it is dealing with the the characters interacting with Pandora or interacting with the Na'vi up close and personal. I really do. I feel when it comes to Sully and Natiri, I believe that's how you say that. Say her name, the character. Um, the whole sequences where Neytiri is training and showing Sully the ways of the Na'vi, that is where the film shines. That's where the screenplay and the story is at its strongest, is with these two characters and Sully being a fish out of water and learning all these different things. Where it's at its weakest is when it decides to turn into an action movie. When it starts to morph into this very generic story of evil, bad, capitalist military versus the native Na'vi, and starts shoving forced messages down your throat about environmentalism and a lot of these other bits of subtext that this film just kind of throws at you at times. And it just becomes kind of dumb and uninspired and lazy. You have scenes with Giovanni Ribisi's character, who might as well be related to Burke from Aliens, talking about, oh, it's just a bunch of trees. And it just loses a lot of its initial intrigue when it comes to this fish out of water story. Yeah, the fish out of water story is something that's very tired and true and been there, done that, but it had been for many, many years. It had been a decade previously before Avatar, and a decade before even that. So it's a story that's very old. It's a template that has been done countless times over. But the reason why it has been done so many times is because it's an effective template. It's always interesting to have a regular, normal, everyday grunt, for instance, and Sully being dropped into this alien world. It's a great way to make Sully an avatar for the audience, so the audience can experience all the wonder at the same time as Sully is. But when it just becomes a big, loud, dumb action movie with mechs, with giant knives, it becomes just ridiculous and just not nearly as effective when it comes to its story. Honestly, I do feel that Avatar would have benefited from having a more straightforward, streamlined story that wasn't trying to be as epic and big and as bombastic as it was, despite the fact that some of these visuals during these action sequences are kind of cool and definitely exciting. But the best parts of the film are stuff with the flying creatures and Neytiri teaching Sully the ways of the Na'vi, and the whole sequences that involve Sully essentially becoming a part of the tribe and doing all these trials and so on. That's really where it's at its best. When it's the military being evil and cliched, and the rich capitalists wanting to destroy the environment and strip mine everything for unobtainium, it's it's just lame. And speaking of lame, unobtainium, like, really, James? You didn't think that one through for very long, now did you? That's what I'm saying. Like, this script, it's so. It's mediocre. It's mediocre when it comes to the plot. It's mediocre when it comes to its characters, because a lot of these characters are just avatars for certain issues or certain cliches that are present in this script. You don't really get a lot of depth for Sully. You don't really get a lot of depth for other characters. Even Neytiri. Like, a lot of them are just cliches or cardboard cutouts that have certain emotions or certain causes that are taped on them. So that really doesn't help either. It makes these characters feel less fleshed out. It makes them feel less real. It makes them feel kind of artificial when it comes to, like, Grace or Colonel Miles Quatrich or even someone like Trudy. or the other Navi. And I mean, this is why I think Cameron should have put his ego aside and actually brought someone else on board to help co-write this script. Maybe add some more life and energy into certain scenes. Take certain scenes out, cut them out entirely because they don't really necessarily need to be there, or they just are not really fully realized. Punch up the dialogue, do other things. Because, like, James Cameron films are also well known for very memorable dialogue and fun banter. What fun banter, memorable dialogue is there in Avatar? I can't even remember a single one liner from this movie. And that's something that was very prevalent in a lot of other James Cameron films. I mean, True Lies just has one good or great one-liner after another for the most part. Same goes for Terminator 2. I mean, even The Abyss had fun lines. The Abyss is a great example of a movie that has a lot of characters, but they feel like they have genuine depth. And there's a bigger reason to be emotionally invested in their fate. Just didn't really feel the same way about Avatar. It felt like these characters, they're just templates, they're cutouts, they're just there to move the plot along. They're not necessarily there to enhance the plot or the visuals, as amazing as the visuals are. And the cliched aspects of the plot where it reminds you of other films like Pocahontas or Fern Gully or Starship Troopers or Dances with Wolves, that doesn't bother me because those films were echoes of the past too. Pretty much any film uh, nowadays, or even at this point in time, was not 100% unique or original to begin with. So that never really bugged me, and that still doesn't bug me, but the predictability of it, that does. And Cameron, in a lot of his other films, like, he did a much better job being less predictable when it comes to how certain arcs end in his story or how certain sequences play out. There's a lot of stuff in this script that's very paint by numbers, and it's very disappointing. Which is another reason why he could have had someone else come in and do some writing and add maybe a little extra vision or approach to things, and that might have benefited the film greatly, because then you could have another voice in the room, another person who could be like, yeah, this is a little too samey. This is we've kind of seen this a lot before in a lot of these other movies that have already come out, and that's okay, but maybe make things a little less predictable in terms of how things play out and how things end, so then the audience is at the very least surprised a few times and doesn't essentially see where the film is going miles before it actually heads to that destination. But that would have never happened because Cameron at the time was a notorious control freak and also had an ego the size of Pandora. So it's one of those things where I think Cameron, in some ways, he was kind of a detriment to his own movie. His ego, his inability to realize that he's not the greatest writer in the world at this point in his career and could potentially use another person on the film to really flesh things out and to really make the film into something truly spectacular and timeless. But no, he didn't do that because Cameron felt that he knew better. Cameron felt that he was at the point where he was a master screenwriter as well as a master filmmaker. And I think that lack of humility is a big reason why this film isn't as well received nowadays by a lot of people. It's a reason why it's considered to be kind of a dated gimmick kind of movie where it's more remembered for the box office gross or the strength of the visuals than it is of its characters and its story. You can have as many amazing jaw-dropping visuals as you want, but if you don't have equally as strong characters and plot lines and other aspects of a script, then it's just the impact that those visuals are going to have, it's not going to be as strong consistently throughout the film, let alone throughout history. So it's just one of those things where, to me, it's kind of a shame. It's one of those what if scenarios. Like, what if James Cameron let someone else in the writer's room with Avatar? Um, I think if he put his ego aside for that moment, then I think a lot of this film's issues, a lot of this film's problems would have been resolved. It wouldn't be nearly as flawed of a movie. And I think these flaws also let down this cast. I mean, Sam Worthington, he's not the best actor in the world, but Sully is not a character that really gives him a lot to work with. It's a very bland, very forgettable character. The character is way more interesting and engaging when he's a Na'vi. When he's in the Avatar body, that's when the character shines. When he's just human Sully, it's boring. There's nothing to this character. There's nothing to him when it comes to charisma or personality or anything. He's, like I said, he's just a cardboard cutout. I feel the same way about other performers in this cast, including really capable actors. I mean, Stephen Lang is a good actor. He was good in a lot of different films previously. I mean, I thought he was really solid as the bad guy or the villain in The Hard Way, as well as in a lot of other films and projects previously to Avatar. But the way that he plays this character is something straight out of a cartoon. He's grunting, he's scowling all the time, huh, 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 and with the just this scowl on his face and just the tough guy voice. It was a performance that was completely unbelievable. Like, you had a film where the CGI Navi and all the other stuff that's going on Pandora was far more believable than the human character, or a lot of these human characters. Uh, Miles was the biggest one for me. I always thought the performance was just really off and just didn't fit the tone of the film. And like I said, he's supposed to be intimidating and like the face of the military and uh, the reason why the Navi and Sully and his friends should be scared and should be worried about what happens next. And I just thought the guy was just your average villain in fucking Captain Planet or some shit. It was silly when I saw it in the theater, and it's still silly now. Sigourney Weaver, she tries her best as Dr. Grace Augustine, the head of the Avatar program, being the mentor for Sully, and trying to build peaceful relations with the Na'vi, but it's still kind of not really much of a role. She doesn't really have much to do. Definitely not when it comes to anything involving any sort of action, which is very disappointing considering that this is Sigourney Weaver working with James Cameron again after they did Aliens. But it's a different kind of character, so I see what they're trying to do. But it's just one of those things, like, nothing that she really ever did other than helping with the creation of the Avatar program ever really amounted to much. She didn't stop the invasion of Home Tree. She didn't really live and survive her wounds and get turned into a Na'vi. Like, none of that ever happened. I don't think she taught any of the, like, all of the Na'vi English either. I just felt like a lot of her contributions to the story and the script were kind of useless. which is a waste of Sigourney Weaver. Michelle Rodriguez as Trudy seemed like this was just wannabe Vasquez in a lot of different ways, but nowhere near as fun to watch. But at least the character was somewhat likable. I kind of liked her character enough that I honestly wish she was in it more. Definitely more than Sigourney Weaver or Joel David Moore's character Norm, who's just a nerdy Navi avatar guy, or Dileep Rao is the scientist who works in the avatar program who supports the rebellion. Definitely more than Giovanni Ribisi as Parker Selfridge in one of the worst performances of his career. Like, what was this shit? It felt like he was asked to do his best Jeremy Piven impression for the entire movie. Like, if you've seen Avatar, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Also, if you've seen a Jeremy Piven performance, like, go look up Jeremy Piven, go see some clips from some of the film season, then go watch some scenes with Giovanni Ribisi in Avatar, and it's uncanny. He did a really good Jeremy Piven impression, but it was so not even remotely anything that provided anything new or of interest that you might as well have just casted Jeremy Piven. James Cameron, if you wanted Jeremy Piven, then you should have just casted Jeremy Piven. Like, what else was he doing at the time that he couldn't take time out of his schedule to do a James Cameron movie? But yeah, completely just bland, nothing performance, because the guy just did his best Jeremy Piven performance throughout the entire movie and never added anything of his own to it. Also, it doesn't help either that the character is written as just dollar store Burke from Aliens. One of his most memorable lines is just talking about, it's just a bunch of trees. And then you've got the voice cast. It was Zoe Saldana, who plays Natiri, but I think she was also doing a lot of stuff with motion capture, as well as CCH Pounder and Wes Studi and Laz Alonso. And they're all fine. I would say Zoe Saldana is definitely probably the biggest standout out of all of these performers who play the Na'vi. I thought she did a great job bringing that character to life. And I know the character's gotten a lot of criticism for just being strong female character, but an alien. But I felt there was a little bit more to that character than just your typical dull, boring, strong female character that you see nowadays in a lot of movies. Like, I thought she showed more humility, she showed more vulnerability, and honestly, I bought her being a bit of a badass, unlike some of these other female characters in a lot of films and stories over the past few years or so. So I don't really think that Natiri is on the same level as, for instance, that chick in Terminator Dark Fate. But yeah, the cast, it's fine. But there isn't anyone in this cast that delivers like a spectacular, just standout performance. And I think I guess maybe Zoe Saldana, considering that she was doing a lot of motion capture stuff and did a great job bringing this completely CGI animated alien to life. But it sure as hell wasn't Sam Worthington or Stephen Lang or even Sigourney Weaver. That's another thing about this movie that is a definite step down from other James Cameron films. Other James Cameron films have much better casts, much better leads, much better supporting casts. And when it comes to the technical aspects, yeah, it's got some nice cinematography by Mauro Fiore, especially when it comes to sequences showcasing the beauty of the world of Pandora. It's well edited by Stephen Rifkin, John Rafua, and James Cameron, especially when it comes to the sequences involving a chase with either one of the creatures in the jungles of Pandora, or training sequences, the scenes with the flying creatures, which I love that scene, that the scene with the flying creatures on the cliffs. That to me is the best sequence in the entire movie, or the action sequences in the end and the climax. The music is by James Horner, and it's I think it's rather fitting that a film that has so much of this, it feels like the same thing, has a score that feels the same way. Like James Horner is a great composer, may he rest in peace, but he definitely did suffer from cribbing and reusing way too many of his signature scores throughout his numerous film projects, and Avatar is no exception to that. There are some really good bits of music that don't sound like the same thing, like "I See You," but then there's other stuff where it just sounds like this is just Willow again. And I just was ultimately very underwhelmed and just kind of unimpressed with the score as a whole. As a result, it just felt like it was just the same thing, like this, just the James Horner greatest hits hour all over again. And I just wasn't really as enthusiastic about that as other people are. I know there's a lot of people who love this score and even think it's one of his best, but I can't see myself listening to this score a lot because it just sounds so similar to various other scores that he did previously. And it's a film that definitely has the budget on the screen. I mean, $230 million in 2009, and who knows how much else extra when it comes to the advertising budget and all this other stuff. But it's a movie that definitely does look like a big budget sci-fi epic with a large scale and size and scope to it. And that still comes across on Blu-ray. Like, this isn't the 4K. Like, the 4K hasn't even come out yet, and this looked absolutely amazing up converted in 4K. I was stunned by how good this looked for a Blu-ray. So stunned that I'm like, I don't know how much better the 4K is going to be, considering how good this Blu-ray looked and sounded with the current setup that I have. But at the end of the day, I like Avatar, but I don't love it because of the inconsistency of the quality of the script. That's really what it comes down to. I like the visuals. I think Cameron did a good job directing it. Some of the performers are okay, despite the fact that they're given such weak characters to work with. But it's the script. It really is that. It's not the fact that it's just the same kind of story I've seen before. It's the fact that it doesn't really add a lot of things new to the same threads or the same beats. And it just makes it so predictable and so one note, despite the film's dazzling visuals. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Avatar. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. See ya.